Hello, everybody. Cal Griffin here, um, with Alwyn Jedi, but also let's do a disclaimer of that no political, no political uh, orientation, sexual orientation, um, race, color, religion, or anything that might be of controversial topic other than what we will be discussing in topics which generally are not in controversy. So, and also something I'm going to be starting to reinforce more readily is that uh, that anybody under the influence, please do not show up or uh, until you're in a position that you can take part without being under the influence. So, with all that being said, uh, that I was having a conversation with a student about the boxwood bonsai and how it's when you're shaping it, trimming it, pruning it, that it won't grow back where it's been pruned and it will go to other areas. Now, it's interesting that a plant would have this type of design in it in how it's made up. But in a way, I can see how this relates to a person, and that where if a person has undergone areas in their lives that are painful, we it's natural to want to avoid them unless one's just a glutton for that. So, which brings to this topic of, and there'll be another topic to go along with it, which also that other topic is how mountain biking can also give us life lessons. I know as odd as that sounds, and these are two totally different areas, but I think we might be able to make this work. So, with the area of mountain biking and how it can apply to work, to life, is that in mountain biking, you've got your different grades, levels of trails, and some are very smooth, some are very fast, with very little what we call technical, janky, choppy areas. Or you have trails that are just completely very tough and very rocky and really pushes a person in ways that are can be quite strenuous and taxing. and mentally and physically and maybe even emotionally. But there are things to be learned from this. So we'll start with one, and then work I'll work into the other. So there's this habit that people have. We generally gravitate towards what we know. And as habit, it's familiar. Familiarity breeds repetition. And simplicity and the lack of going outside of where we're comfortable. Now, what got me thinking about this boxwood bonsai is that, like I was saying, it doesn't grow branches where it's been groomed from. Okay. So if one is capable or is willing to learn this in our own lives, then we will see those things that are painful for us and find ways and learn how to avoid them. Though, granted, there is a learning curve in this because one develops habits, one develops a thought process, one develops in a routine with it. And say, for example, you have a person that is a gang member. And from my understanding and things that I've seen, that even though one may leave a gang, they might still have an affiliation with it. And so the question I would ask is, even though one has left a gang and has changed their ways, have they truly left that gang? All right. Or is it a way for them to be able to help others to change their ways, change their direction, change their lifestyle, and the choices they make? So that asks the question of, if we are doing things that are painful for us, is it due to lack of choices, lack of the desire to do something different? Or is it something that we are refusing to do? And in that, this is, I think, where we have to ask the question, or somebody may ask us, why do we keep doing this? Why do and must we feel the need to go back into areas of our lives that are hurtful? They are, in some ways, demeaning, demoralizing.
What's kind of interesting about boxwoods is just because a branch was removed, it doesn't usually stop growing. And usually, When you will remove a branch during a healthy season, it is during a season of growth.
Okay. So the season of growth in that would be,
It's when the plant is changing the most. It's when it's growing new leaves, when it's stretching out. And so you will remove branches that it no longer needs or that would affect the bush.
okay. So in a way, that would be like removing people or elements from our lives that we no longer need, right?
Could be.
Okay. So,
And if the inner branches of the bush get too dense,
right.
if it can't receive sunlight or wind, it will likely get sick and die if it doesn't lose that part.
Right. So, in a sense, as weird as this may sound, say with the force, okay, if one spends too much time in one area or is consumed by these things that are considered dark side in nature or in dark side in action or in thought, one can become ill per se, can become more influenced by these thoughts. So, in a way, what you're saying, in a way, can go with that. If things are, if the branches, there's too much that prevents sunlight, air, what have you, getting in to nourish that whole plant, it becomes sickly and reduces or restricts and eventually does kill the plant. So, in a way, the boxwood and working with a bonsai is a reflection of life.
I mean, they would use bonsai to teach Buddhist philosophy.
Okay. Say, like, for example, what, like, in what way?
Well, it could be similar to the way that we're discussing it now, or other aspects of the plant, or the way that it represents certain aspects of nature, because you're nourishing a baby tree that you put in a pot and you're trying to make it look very much natural in a sense.
Okay. So, with that, with that, putting something like that in a pot so it looks natural, how would that reflect a person? How would that reflect where we can change?
It can be from the nutrients you put in the soil to how the roots are sucking up the water and the nutrients, to how the roots are formed near the bottom of the trunk, how elaborate the system is. It can be how the trunk is shaped, how it's curved, how it has occurred damage over time, if it's undergone a season of fire or dead wood. Part of it, but it can also represent a part of our lives in that sense, that even with the dead wood, there's a piece of the tree that is dead that can't have any type of growth on it. There's another part of the tree that grows out of it.
Okay. So, with the nourishment and nutrients, if one is in a healthy environment, one tends to thrive, right?
Yes, that includes the soil, any kind of fertilizer you use, the sunlight, the water. Sometimes it
Right.
depends on the type of water for certain plants. Some of
Right.
them need very specific water waterings. For bonsai, you have a special way of watering it so it doesn't like die. So,
So, in a spiritual sense, what we allow can be nourishing and nurturing, and we can grow from that and change into a much healthier individual. Or if it's bad soil and the wrong elements are added,
or too much fertilizer
right, too much of a bad thing
or too much of a
can,
good thing either.
yeah, can become poisonous and toxic.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a care between both, a
And
relationship between both.
it can be different from species of plant to species of plant. That includes bonsai because bonsai are either vines, bushes, or small trees.
Okay. So with that, let's refer that and kind of relate it to people. One in one's environment, a common person, or one that has been exposed to a very small area that doesn't doesn't lend itself to one wanting to grow. Or you have somebody that has the abundance of what is necessary, what's needed, and even then some to actually get what they need. But yet, the person that has abundance doesn't grow as much, even though you've got everything there to lend itself to help either that plant or that person grow and become a great example or product or person. So
Do you know what the difference is between a plant confined in a pot and a plant in the soil?
I'm sure I have an answer if I thought about that for a moment, but go ahead. What do you?
Um, if a plant is in a pot, it's more susceptible to cold. Insects can get into under the where the roots are and start
Yeah.
eating away at the roots. There's a lot of things that can happen if it's overwatered. It can get mold in the soil. A lot of things can happen to a bonsai that wouldn't necessarily happen to a tree that's planted in the ground.
So this can go
You're
where one.
you're confining a tree to a pot. You're trimming down its roots so its roots aren't growing as big as it normally would. You're keeping the plant small and a fraction of the size that it's supposed to naturally grow to.
So you're being selective in what it's growing with and from and its environment, right? You're
Yeah.
protecting it, right? So with a person, if one chooses to surround themselves with the right people and the right activities and the right knowledge, one can grow immensely, right?
Hmm.
So, with a similar to a bonsai, that given the right nutrients, the right amounts, the right environment, the right soil, then that bonsai will grow and become very, very healthy. Dark green leaves, a good healthy brown or color for the stalk for the main stalk, um, and the roots can have a healthy color. Um, Same as a person. If a person has people that influence what they do, and the person has grown up in this, same as the plant doesn't know initially what what's going to help it. It might at first help it out, right? But yet, over a period of time, too much nitrogen or phosphates will end up possibly burning the leaves.
That
Whereas,
is what happens when you over fertilize.
yeah, so overabundance.
And even if you have a healthy plant, it still goes through seasons. And if it
Okay,
doesn't have what it needs in those seasons, it won't do well.
so
So, like in an area where I live, we have really hot summers. And if the plant doesn't have the right shade and isn't watered enough, it won't do well.
right,
And then you got the winters and the springs and the falls is when it grows. But in winter, a lot of plants go dormant or it's just hanging out in the cold. Boxwoods themselves, their leaves will bronze and they won't lose them. They'll just turn like a brownish or a goldish color.
so during those seasons, the plant will grow and flourish and bloom and become more productive. Whereas a person, say, if they're going through a period of change and that person may feel lost because of moving away from certain things and those efforts, which in a way can be depressing, can be unpleasant because of the discomfort with it, because you're changing or working to change your world. You're working to change how one may see things, uh, and how one may look to see themselves differently. Whereas in one element and environment, the person may not see hope, but yet start introducing things that can, in small amounts at first, cause one to think, cause a seed to start growing and take root, which I'll grant it is not a fast process, but if done right with the right time and the right amount, one can grow like that bonsai where things are shaped, things are molded, things the thought process changes, much like when the bonsai is trimmed and groomed, it
They
can become
also direct the leaves with wire, or the
okay.
branches. The branches are directed with wire into where the direction where they want it to grow.
So it would be structured.
It's structured, but if you leave the wire on too long, it can cause imprints in the branches,
Right.
which make it look not as natural.
So what initially did help it, it eventually begins to hurt it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, but that would also mean the same thing if someone becomes too stringent in removing things from their lives, they can become too rigid in their own life and not and become afraid of returning to where they've been moving away from or have moved away from in what they have brought into their lives. Okay. What they grew up with, what they know, what habits they've acquired. Okay. Which can be that wire, which will eventually leave a very deep impression.
There's a quote I remember
Okay.
from a video game, actually. When you would go and pull out an item and it wasn't the time to use it, it would say, there's a time and place for everything, but I don't think now's the time.
Right. Right.
That was from a Pokemon game.
Right. There's always a time and place, to pick and choose, which are,
We all
in this
have
case.
seasons in life, and there
Yes.
is a time for everything, and that comes from some verses in the Bible or something.
No, let's not go there because of
No,
what
I know.
religious right with what religious connotations or innuendos that might spur, which and I'm not going to say religion is bad. Many have their good points, but however, that leaves a door
I
open for
I think just like what it was talking about was the main point, not where it's from.
right. Okay. So how does mountain biking relate to this? Okay. Now, some may be going who haven't mountain biked, but have only heard about it and maybe seen the results or the aftermath or effects of a person who has and does mountain bike. Okay. Now, anything that deals with a very highly active, full contact sport, exercise, does have its inherent dangers. All right. Uh, we, as I was saying, we can go through a trail that's very fast, very smooth, much like life, right? Things don't, there's no bumps in the road. Or if there are, they're not, they don't affect the direction one goes. Okay. They're manageable. They're easy to maneuver, which don't affect your pace or your direction or your focus. So there's not a lot of effort in a way of a smooth, what we call fast, hard packed trail. Okay, which we call a single track. Now, where this applies to life and how we can be going along with how our life is and things be going according to our plan. Your bike is set up and it's pretty much tuned to work very well. But then say you come across an area in the trail that is not so smooth. It's rougher, very rocky. And you're kind of familiar with how to navigate that and how fast, what cadence, what gear you cross this area in. It could be small. Okay. So you could just keep going and roll over it with speed and carry yourself with speed. And it's a very short spurt. And things settle back down and you had a heart rate, your pulse rate comes back down. Or you can come to an area that might throw you off your direction. Say slick roots, for example, don't offer a lot of traction, which the bike can actually slide sideways. And the wheels can come out from underneath you and hit the ground. Okay, well, if one has never learned how to ride slippery roots, that becomes a whole different matter, becomes a very big challenge. How do you steer and handle the bike with your body and hands and tires? Do you just roll over them and keep in the direction you go? Or do you find a way to go around it? Maybe you've got what they call a detour. Okay, fair enough. Which occasionally we all need a detour. No argument. But however, what if the area you come to doesn't have a detour and ends up becoming highly challenging? There's climbs, which can be very steep, very technical. The ground isn't full of traction anymore. You have to learn what to do, how to pace, how much to apply in the pedals to climb that. Much like areas in our own lives. When things get rough, things become kind of uncertain. How much do we exert? Do we learn from others and how to navigate this? It's like, well, okay, you come to a longer climb that isn't so smooth. It's going to take more effort. And it's going to stress you out a lot, or more so than what you're accustomed to. So maybe sitting in the seat and relaxing isn't such the best thing, where you got to get up out of the saddle. That's what a bicycle seat is also called, is a saddle. And you have to get up and you have to start applying more pressure into the pedals. And you have to put a little more weight on your upper body to help support yourself. So one has to be fairly strong in resolve, a little more tenacious, apply more focus to it, more concentration to what they're doing, become more mindful. But even with all of that, and you've learned and you've experienced this, you're still possibly going to fall down because you might hit something in the way that might cause your momentum to stall. So you're going to fall down and you're going to crash. Okay. You're going to hit the ground. And hitting hard, rocky ground, I can tell you, is not a very fun thing. Even if, and it's a, without realizing it, and when you're on your way down, there's a cactus, and you brush or land on that cactus, which does happen. I will tell you that does and can happen. So, along with scrapes and bruises, and maybe you're leaking bodily fluids, you're picking out these cactus quills out of your skin. So, your pride has gotten hurt. Well, one can go, I can't do this. This is just too much. And I will tell you from experience that from an area that I grew up in and the writing in that area, I was used to that. I was used to things being very groomed, very manicured, and pretty much, you know, not as difficult, not as challenging. And then I moved into a different part of the country where the riding and the trails were way different, way more difficult, way more challenging. Plus, there was a big elevation change. So I had to learn how to adapt. And one has to learn to adapt for climate change, for the change in climate. So, but then once you get the good information, much like a bonsai, the fertilizer, one starts to grow, one becomes stronger. One starts to adapt and learn, much like the bonsai tree. It learns to adapt, it changes, it grows. And so that plant will undergo a bit of adversity. It's much like mountain biking, learning to navigate with the information you learn. We ask questions. We undergo a transformation in a way. Our brain, our minds, our attitude start to change. And we can learn when to apply more pressure to ourselves to actually continue to move forward. Much like a wire with a bonsai, you're applying enough pressure to get that thing to go into a direction. And progress is being made. You're shaping your world, you're shaping your life, you're shaping your mind. Physically, you're changing. Because let's face it, a bonsai does change shape, much like if a person is mountain biking, they will invariably lose weight. They'll trim down because that's added weight on the bicycle, which makes your efforts more difficult. But yet, your heart, your lungs, your mind begin to get stronger. Your bones get stronger, much like a bonsai, if it's getting the right fertilizer and it's in the right pot and soil, its roots get stronger. Its main stalk gets stronger.
And then you have this one leading branch that is going from the roots to whatever direction the main bonsai is growing.
Yeah.
That's directing the look of the entire bonsai.
Right. And there's a technique used in mountain biking. And who those that have cycled or have done some type of movement oriented exercise, you focus on a spot to reach. And climbing on a bicycle, one of the tricks is to find a spot that's up ahead and you focus on that and you keep moving. And it's called the rubber band. It's in a way, it's kind of a rubber band effect where when you're focusing on that, it seems to kind of draw you towards it. But you're forgetting, you're reducing your discomfort and your mind of how much further one has to go. And before you know it, you've reached the crest, the peak of something. And much like a bonsai plant or a plant, when it's in its season and it's blooming and it's been cultivated, it's been trimmed, it's been nurtured, it's been groomed, it's been trimmed out.
Something that I learned that's interesting about bonsai in Japan is they have to undergo cultivation for 50 years before it's given the title of a bonsai in Japan.
You know, that's much like the elite in mountain biking. They have an elite class in mountain biking where these riders, you've got your novice, which are the inexperienced, and you have your amateurs, which have more experience, which are in better shape. And then you've got your um, there's another class, but and then you've got what's known as an elite class. Okay. And then in some cases, if you race, there's a class called the Clydesdale, which those are big guys. Okay. They're like 200 pounds, 200-pound guys that are just big guys. And then you have your small, your lighter weight, smaller framed people like myself that, where so, but, and so, but everybody has their strong suit. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. It's much like a bonsai probably has its strengths and weaknesses and where it doesn't grow as well. And that needs more attention. But in that, if you have an area, if you suck at climbing, you've got to focus on that to get your stamina up, to get more strength in your body, in your legs, your cardiovascular. Change your thoughts to embrace it, to go, yes, I must get better here in order for me to maybe get competitive or just be able to keep up with my friends or maybe just have the gratification and the feeling of accomplishment, of through the work, that a hill that used to kick your ass and a climb that used to do that, you end up maybe not getting up it as good as your buddies, but at least now you're upright and you're getting up it and stronger. And so the effort to catch back up and to move forward and to keep going past that climb becomes easier. You get faster, you're stronger. And who knows? Maybe you end up passing one of your buddies. So that feeling of satisfaction of I have changed. I have gotten strong. My mind, my attitude, my view has gotten stronger. Yep. Last riding season, uh, there's a guy I go out and ride with who's was a former competitive rider. And he told me one day, oh, this weekend we're going to go out and we're going to ride. We're going to do a 10-mile ride. I'm like, huh? What do you mean we're going on a 10-mile ride? Yeah. Well, I ain't never done a 10-mile ride on my mountain bike on the street in my life. So my attitude in the beginning wasn't very good. And a mountain bike is not something you want to ride on the street for 10 miles, especially if you've got one that's not the lightest rig in the world. And you've got tires that aren't set up for the street. So your effort is you're putting out a lot more effort to keep that bike moving. And especially if 5 miles going out is uphill. Well, I'm going, all right. So it's not going to be the fastest pace in the world for me. But eventually you get up that climb that's 5 miles to the top. Well, there is a saying in mountain biking, pleasure and pain, or pain and pleasure. The climb is what you're working for, the part that hurts, the pain. But in that, you are growing stronger. Maybe a little bit, but you're getting stronger. And your body's going, I want to stop. So mentally, you're starting to play this game with yourself because your body's starting to hurt. Your legs are getting sore. But yet, the only way back is to stay on the bicycle. Or you could wait and one of your friends you're riding with to go up, finish the ride, and come back. So either way, you have a choice. To either sit where there's no shade off the side of the road, feel defeated, maybe do the walk of shame, much like the person caring for the bonsai. You can choose to care for the bonsai, treat it badly, groom it wrong, and it comes out looking pretty bad.
There's a few bonsai that I've lost starting out.
Yeah.
You got to learn how to take care of it, right?
Right, right. So, yeah, that's like when you're mountain biking, you have to learn to change your eating. You have to learn to, you know, take on different habits and see things differently. Now, when I first went on that 10-mile ride, I was hating life. My seat was adjusted badly. So, areas that were having pressure applied became very, very painful and excruciatingly so. And I would have to get off my bicycle to let that pressure recede, or stand up and let that pressure, let the relief. So let the relief come. And believe me, when a saddle is not adjusted right, the parts that the pressure is being put on are, let's say, very delicate, and can become quite excruciating. And I'm not exaggerating. So, but yet there are times when we are undergoing change in our own lives that are highly uncomfortable and sometimes very painful. Say, with people we did associate with, we might have to cut ties, which that is never, that is not always an easy thing to do. It's painful in a way, because these are people you might have known for years. So having to leave that because it is no longer giving you that once thought benefits of what once was productive. Now it becomes counterproductive to one's growth, one's thought. It's stunted one's progress. So then one has to look at that very realistically.
When
And
branches are pruned, sometimes we have to grow in a different direction.
yes, in order for us to bloom out more as a person, flourish. But in that, one can take lessons and experiences from those times that weren't always the better for us, and reflect on that and make something good out of it. And then we gain more wisdom from it. We gain knowledge from it. So, in a way, we become stronger. Mentally, our fortitude increases. Our morals change. We're not dealing with such a moral dilemma of these things that are unhealthy. Because let's face it, things that are unhealthy for us can feel very good. Much like getting too much ice cream when you go to McDonald's or something, right? You like that fudge and that caramel and everything all over, your sundae. Well, eventually eating 2 Sundays a week ends up starting to do things to you that are not good for you. Or maybe in one case, one has had a constant use of narcotics and illicit substances. Okay. Or maybe one that's completely accessible, and it may be time to cut that loose from your lives because it's affecting how you see things, your relationships, your attitude, your interaction with living. So it's kind of become a mainstay, much like when someone's been in an active gang member for so long. Life of chaos, destruction, unaliving things, or exchange of funds for products. Maybe somebody got hurt, or maybe you provided something for somebody that ended up causing greater problems. So you have to defend that. And you get to this vicious cycle, whether it be small or whether it be large. Either way, it's counterproductive to our growth and to a bonsai. But like this other person said, that you learn how to work with a bonsai. You learn how to nourish it. You learn how to feed it. You learn how to trim it. You learn how to shape it. You learn until you get what you
You work with it and you start out small, and then eventually there are people who get to very advanced techniques where you're grafting the roots onto rocks or something.
right.
And
So
so you have the plant growing off of like a cliff or something.
so which I which I can see happening. Okay, I can see where a plant can grab hold of a rock. All right, but for someone who has
Starting
held on,
out, that is a very advanced technique, and there are people who have killed plants trying to get that done.
I can imagine. I can imagine, much like one who has rooted themselves into a life or a practice of things that eventually does start sapping your life from you. And much like mountain biking, there are times when you feel like you were dying. And It's things are just that uncomfortable for you because physically you are at your limits and you have to stay in it. You have to stay on. And so you're physically and mentally uncomfortable and maybe even emotionally a bit uncomfortable because then a mind game, a psychological game with yourself happens of, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for this. And let's face it, not everybody can mountain bike. Okay. Not everybody can have has the odd sense of be willing to undergo that discomfort. And in a way, there's a sense of masochism in mountain biking and in sports activities like that because of the discomfort that does come with it. So there's a mental game we play with ourselves. And maybe finding a song in your head and letting that song play in your head to take your mind off of the discomfort you're feeling while you're undergoing. But after a while, like the person that has gained that skill to grow a bonsai on a rock, which that I have to say strikes my curiosity up a lot. Like, how do you get a plant to take root on a rock? And it still lives. Okay. Much like people that become very efficient.
It has to for there are a lot of bonsai that have their roots above the soil. And so it's a
Right.
way of taking the roots above the soil and onto a rock. So it's not just completely out of the soil. It's attached to a rock that's in between it and the rest of the nutrients it's getting.
So you kind of
But
have
to do that, you have to stress the roots, and that leaves it open to sun damage and the
yeah.
elements.
So you're basically coaxing it to eventually change. Okay. You're coaxing it to adapt and working to keep it healthy at the same time. Okay. So it's vulnerable to things it's not accustomed to.
But it looks
And
absolutely impressive once it's done right.
I can only imagine. And it's like that guy or the writer that used to not be so graceful on climbs, on rocky climbs. Yet then you see him 6 months later, a year later, and the guy becomes poetry in motion and handles his bike. Maybe he got him a new bike that fit him better, that was more suited for where he's right. He got the right tools for the job. And he becomes very good at bike handling skills. But he had to educate himself. He had to learn. He had to trial and error, fall, get
In bonsai, you'll have those beginners that go, oh, I want to have this bonsai mounted on a rock. But you have to work your way up to that point to keep
yes.
Bonsai healthy.
So, how does all of this play to one's growth, one's changing?
Growth doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't. And it can be very uncomfortable and painful. And we're going to all have moments and periods of time that we are suffering. And the beauty with some changes that that suffering is for a reason. There's a purpose behind it. When one grows from what they used to be, say, there's a phrase that the Marine Corps uses: pain is weakness leaving the body. I saw that and I'm like, what are you talking about? Pain is weakness leaving the body. Well, right now, my body hurts. And I'm thinking about this, and somebody being a smartass brings it up. Oh, pain is weakness leaving the body. And you're 3 miles in, you've already had 2 crashes. So you're not very comfortable anymore.
There's a difference between pain and suffering, though.
Well, but when you've got both at the same time going on physically, which plays on you mentally, because you're, instead of being more positive and more apt to want to go further, you begin to question at times, do I need to keep going on this ride? Because I've already had 2 bad spills. I'm already scraped up, and I've got really deep bruising in a part of my body, but yet I don't want to quit. I want to keep
There's
going.
there's a story in Buddhism that someone gets shot with an arrow, and that's
Right,
the first pain.
right.
And then they decide to stab themselves with another arrow, which is basically um them
All right.
their reaction to it, them causing their own suffering because of the pain caused by the first arrow.
Oh, I'm really having a bad moment right now. I've just gotten stabbed with something that got thrown into, got projected into my body. So I'm going to stick this other sharp object into my body.
Yep.
What if you grab the wrong arrow? It's got a poison tip on it. What then? What do you do? Is my question. Though I get the though I get the point of that, is that you take your mind off of what originally was causing the
It
pain and the
is
suffering.
the first arrow is the original pain. It's the thing that had caused the pain in the first place.
Yeah.
And then the second arrow is you and your thoughts about it, you causing your own suffering from your reaction to the original
Right.
arrow.
Right. The cool part about this, though, is this is where the human is resilient. Because after a while, there becomes a natural pain numbing. Temporary, but, and I've experienced this on the trail, is that after a period of time, what was hurting quit, because you're focusing on something else. And then things start to come around. You start to get back into your groove, your flow, right? Your mindset. Even though you've got scrapes and everything else, and your skin is very tender and raw, and sweat gets into it, and you might possibly have a fractured finger or something, or you've sprained something, which that can hurt. But then you forget about it because you've gotten back into your space. You've gotten back into your progress, your progression, your focus, your goals. And I know in a way, some people go, I don't have goals in mind. I don't have a direction. Well, sometimes just holding on for the ride and trusting in the process, and maybe also letting others lead, mentor, show you, teach. Maybe the one gear you were using to climb those rocky hills was not the right gear, and somebody goes, hey, try this gear, or maybe try hitting it a little faster. And then from there, you go, oh, wait, this was easier. I didn't put as much effort in. And so you've got strength, energy for later. Much like, I guess, if you've got a healthy bonsai, if it's a healthy tree, it can tolerate some of that change, that transfer of roots or rooting situation. It can tolerate it if worked through it. And the cool part is that once that tree is taken root and is strong, it yields great results. Now, in mountain biking, say you've climbed these rocky ascents, and then you come back and you're going, I have to go down that now. Well, things have changed. So the practice would be is to get off the bicycle and look around. Look at the way you're going to go down and what it might take to not come off the bike, to successfully come down. It might not be as graceful, it might not be as efficient, but if you make it to the bottom without falling, then you have successfully made the descent. You made the downhill. And you learned how to manage the bike down it. Maybe applying brake here and there to control your descent, to control your direction, much like on a fast trail. Well, one would think on a fast trail that's easy, it would not have its hazards. On the contrary, there are plenty of hazards. Say you're going on a fast trail and it's maybe slick, it's dry, it's dusty, and you get a little overconfident and you go in a bit hot into a turn and the bike washes out from under you, or you braked at the wrong time. So you end up going down or end up going a bit wide in the turn and you hit a tree. And trees don't move. And they stop. Hurts badly. Or it's funny because of how you came off the bike and everybody else is laughing at you. And so, but we have to learn to laugh at ourselves through our errors, through our mistakes. We have to keep a sense of humor. And so, but once you get that down, you learn, you can go, yeah, I can get through here faster. Then you go, I wonder if I can cut a minute, 2 minutes off my time through here. And eventually, yes, you will. You learn when to brake or sometimes not even use the brakes anymore or minimally. So you start hitting things faster, you start hitting them harder, and you've become a stronger rider, much like a bonsai groomer. You become very good at it.
Usually they're either called hobbyists or professionals.
Right. So, but once the hard parts are over, enjoyment happens because there is a growing and growth period and learning curve with each one of those, and even with ourselves. Let's face it, when you start mountain biking, it's never easy. It sucks. It is uncomfortable. It's embarrassing. You get stalled out by something, or you're going too slow and you are going, he made it over it. Why can't I? Well, maybe you need to go a little faster and learn to relax. Let the bike move under you. Maybe your tires are too hard. Maybe you need to soften them. Maybe your suspension is not set up right. You know, so we evaluate, we look, we learn. And then we look back from that time and we can actually go, yeah, I have grown. I have changed. I've gotten stronger. I've been able to tolerate more. So, in many ways, yes, we can be that bonsai. We can learn through coaxing and work to have our roots still be in a very healthy soil. But
And
we're
every 5 to 10 years, they get repotted, and
yeah,
they always keep the roots about the same size as the foliage.
right. So if we don't forget our roots, no pun intended, and we gain new roots that are healthy.
They will trim down the roots to make sure that they're the same size.
Right.
And you can only trim away, I think, up to 75% of the plant at a time.
So you have to figure out,
What you want to do in certain times and wait for the plant to heal before
yes.
continue.
Yeah. Much like what we have to do with ourselves at times, at periods, seasons.
A plant goes through times of rest where it will stay dormant or it'll grow.
Yeah. So it's inevitable either way. If you can't do a bonsai right, and you've tried and tried and tried, and you just find that maybe that one particular bonsai, that plant doesn't work well, or you just, it's too temperamental for you. Maybe one
I
that's a
can't
little more,
do junipers.
yeah,
No.
so, something that's more forgiving, right?
Yeah.
That allows the error. Okay, much like in mountain biking, say you've got a bike that has not as long a travel in the suspension. Okay. Oh, maybe I need one that's got a longer travel in the suspension. Or they might need a bigger tire on it to absorb some of the blows more and to give me more traction, which would help reduce my washouts and turns and would help gain more traction in climbs. And the longer travel would be to help absorb the impacts and reduce the rider, the rider's discomfort in a bit, right? But yet, if you've gotten faster, that suspension will absorb the speed more and absorb the impact more. So, to a point, everything's got its limit, everything's got its points. But, but, or maybe you learned how to ride the area more light to become lighter on the bike. And so change happens no matter what. It's inevitable. If we stay one way, going one direction with our lives, it's going to eventually change, maybe for the worse. Maybe something happens that wakes you up and you go, you know what? It's enough. This is enough. I can't do this anymore, because you've just gotten to the point of regret where your life is nothing but regrets. Or you go, you know what? It is time. I've grown beyond this. And it could take one thing. It could maybe a person you met that said something. It could maybe mean you've met somebody that has become important to you. Or maybe you've just become unreliable with yourself and you can't trust yourself anymore. You don't want it, but yet you can't see yourself without it. But yet, when you go back to what you were doing because you can't see yourself without it, you feel bad after you've done it. And then you go, yeah, I've had enough, but I don't know how to change my direction. Well, there's a thing in mountain biking. If you look at the tree, you're going to hit it. And that if you look ahead in the trail to avoid hitting the tree, they call that trail vision. You're reading the trail in front of you to navigate, to avoid maybe hitting that tree that might jump out in front of you. Trees move. Take it from me. Trees do move. So they do reach out and grab you sometimes. So, or maybe you've gotten older and you can't quite ride like you used to. And so maybe it's time to change how often you might visit a trail that you really do like. But it's become a little tough for you. But yet, if you know it and you know yourself, you know where you can change. You can change to navigate a little faster, maybe a little easier, or maybe it's time to just leave that trail for the ones that are younger, that can tolerate that beating for a while. Or maybe just riding that trail has just become too expensive because of the hardware on your bike and the components on it. It just, you get tired of replacing stuff all the time. So change does happen. It has to. We have to take a different look. We have to see things differently. We have to change our attitude, look at it differently, accept some things because it's just needed to happen. And when that happens, we make more mature choices. We make better judgment. We have better judgment. And we gain more wisdom from the experiences we've had. And we still progress. We still learn. We still at times let people lead us. And sometimes we lead others. And things take a direction that we never could see. But yet, by the universe in itself, we find that we are gaining more nourishment. We might be resistant at first, but eventually, hopefully in a very short time, we find that that in a way it's more comfortable. There's less chaos around us and within ourselves. We become more harmonious with ourselves and the things around us. And then we can breathe easier. We can relax more. We can accept things much easier. But it's all in the process. It's all in over time, like you were saying. Nothing does happen overnight. Yeah, that once good gung ho rider that used to be able to kill it on the trails ends up not being able to kill it so much on the trails anymore. Those areas he used to kill descending on that were like heart pounding, sketchy, janky, loose areas Maybe he had a ride down at one time and figured this is too much for me to handle anymore. My hands aren't able to handle this as much anymore. My shoulders. And I'm older now and I don't recover as fast. And so he ends up maybe on occasion going back to that trail because he misses it, which is fine, but he knows what he's in store for. And maybe this time he gets off his bike and he may walk down it. And he had to like rest on that, yeah, I have to walk down this section now, which is fun. Sometimes we have to be able to swallow our pride and go, you know what? Yeah, it's okay to walk down this. And that is perfectly fine. Nobody's going to look at you any differently for the worse. You know, you're preserving yourself. Your survival instincts are kicking in. You pay attention to yourself more. You pay attention to your body more. What you think, how you think. But yet you still had a good ride because you made it back to your vehicle. You made it home. Or maybe if you do bonsai competitions, you've been struggling and struggling and struggling, and then finally you get an award for top bonsai. Damn. Either way, you've accomplished a whole lot. You've made it. You've earned your stripes. You've earned your time. You're you're reaping your rewards. And you can see yourself in the mirror going, hi, how are you? You've changed, but you're still the same person. And for those that have undergone real change, true changes, they can do that. With that dull look that used to be there now is bright eyes. Their face doesn't look as drawn or stretched or strained. Their eyes don't look as tired. In a way, they're renewed. They got the right fertilizer, got into the right pot. And so, you know, I'm gonna leave this. I'm gonna leave y'all with this thought, like I try to do after every cast. That we all, in a way, come to a point in our lives that cause us to question, cause us to have to step back and to be okay with having to step back and take a look at things. And maybe not so much to be critical, but to realize that things are good, to be grateful, to have the gratitude of where we are now, to be able to go, I can do this, I can get through it. Hi, hello, life. I've showed up. What do you have for me? I'm good. Let's do this. And we welcome what may come our way. And we can go to bed that night going, you know what? Yeah, I did all right today. So I'm going to leave y'all with that. And for those that were here, thank you. And for those that are listening, that are following, that are subscribing, I appreciate that too. And be good to yourselves, to each other. Pet your cat, pet your dog, whatever else. Anyway, everybody be good to yourselves. Take care. Love one another. Dow Griffin out. Thank you.